You're on Pure 24/7 Radio. It's Dan here on your Tuesday Pure Brunch, and it's time for our occasional brunch blether. Occasional, as in we just get round to it when we feel like it, really, or have something interesting to share with you. So I am really pleased to be joined by not one but two people today, and we're going to chat all about church communications and maybe a little common sense within that. So I say a very warm welcome to Joe Gallant and Hannah Fleming-hill. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
How are we doing today?
Yeah, all good. Good to be with you.
Yeah, nice. This exciting.
Yeah, it's good to chat. So obviously, as well as Pure Radio, we're involved in lots of other things. We've actually just launched the Pure Media magazine, so nice online thing to try and promote family friendly, a different way of doing church comms. But you guys are involved with lots of different versions of communications and things. So let's hear from either of you. Who should we get? Hannah's at the top of my screen, so I'm going to go with Hannah first. Hannah, just give us a little pencil sketch of who you are and what you get involved in FH Digital and other stuff.
And other stuff, yeah. Okay, so hello, my name's Hannah. I'm based down on the sunny south coast of Dorset. Well, it's not really sunny today, but the south coast of Dorset. I am a freelance kind of comms consultant, digital missioner, and I help churches and charities to get started and improve their confidence, their experience and their content, not if they're content with it, on social media and digital comms. So it really ranges from one-off audits and consultancy to sort of full-on short films about anniversary for a choir or something like that. So yeah, it really ranges what I help with.
Yeah, brilliant. And Joe, what about yourself?
Yeah, primarily I'm a web designer, but a bit of a varied background. So I started out in video and in the AV world and a lot of live events, and then kind of gradually narrowed it down from sort of marketing and social media stuff, focusing into the graphic design. And now the two services that I offer are branding and web design. And I do that for churches, for charities, for small businesses. There's a nice mix there, as well as, a few other hats. So we've got the podcast. We've got, I co-lead a Christian business group down here in Kent, where I'm based. And then I also do some work for our church, which is in Rochester as well.
Excellent. Yeah, so of course with the joys of the good old interweb, I'm up here in Pure's Scottish studio, and you guys are down in southeast and southwest, so we can spread everywhere. It's always good to chat. And you teased there, Joe, the podcast. So there is this podcast called Gourds and Pomegranates, which in a few weeks' time, avert your eyes because I will feature on that. I can only apologise. Well, hopefully it was a fun chat anyway. So that was when we thought, well, let's kind of return the favour and bring you guys onto Pure as well. So between the two of you, who wants to talk to us about this Gourds and Pomegranates podcast? What on earth is that all about?
It's a fun one. I mean, it doesn't exactly do what it says on the tin with a name like Gourds and Pomegranates, but let's go with the name first. We wanted to, rather than it just be like a boring, here's another church comms bit of content sort of thing. Gourds and Pomegranates is based on excellence, and so God's instructions for the temple, where you had these elaborate designs and things made out of silver and bronze, and gourds and pomegranates featured there. And really, it's the heart of what we do, that whatever you're doing with your church for communicating, which can mean a lot of things, but fundamentally, churches are in the business of communicating. Whatever you're doing, we want to help you do it as well as possible with excellence. And that doesn't mean spending loads and loads and loads of money. It's about doing it, with in a way which is quite effective for a little amount of money, and just helping you be efficient with it. But that's the passion behind it. What it looks like over the last few years is about 60 episodes so far of really kind of down to earth instructional content. So we have some discussions around why we're doing comms. We have some sort of step-by-step instructions of how to put together a comms plan or how to put together a social media plan, all those sorts of things. And then, as you've alluded to with your guest appearance, we have some brilliant guests come on as well, and we chat about their experience and about specific areas of comms that they're involved with.
Yeah, excellent. So Hannah, talk to us about some of the people that have got coming up on the current series that's running just now.
Oh, Hang on a second. I'm gonna
I'll
have
put
to
you on
get
the spot
that.
then,
Put you on the
I
spot.
can't- That's. I kind of. They end up all blurring, and we had one. We were talking about in preparation for it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that person we had not so long ago." No, it turns out they were in like the first series or something.
It does definitely blur.
What series are we on now?
Series 6.
Series 6.
So yeah, it's been quite nice because as well, a lot of the people have been. It's been a nice variety of guests. So it's not all people who are doing comms. It's people who are doing comms or people who are in a specific skill set or people who are ministers. So for this series, we've got Maria Warren, who's talking with us about HR and so sort of the things that are relevant within church context. We've got yourself. We've had Laura Trenier, who is a kind of PR comms expert and having worked with lots of different Christian organizations. So that was back in series 2. We've had a lady called Judith talking about GDPR. We've had Ben Elliott, who worked at the Well in Sheffield, but now is doing a lot with the Send. And then where's the big list of people? we had
This is as much planning as we do here as well.
Yeah, for
right.
series 5, no, sorry, I should know this off the top of my head. For series 5, we had a big
we had a bit of a round table, didn't we?
Yeah,
So
really
we were asking people who weren't necessarily known for being in the church comms world, but were known in the church world about comms. So we had Glenn Scrivener join us, it was brilliant evangelist. We had Krish Kandaya, we had Joe Frost from the EA, and we had Carl from London City Mission as well. So it's been a really good mix. And this series, we've also had a few sort of crossovers, which I include this in. But we also had a guy from Worship Ministry Training Podcast called Alex. And I mean, that's an amazing podcast. It's been around for a lot longer than we have. It was the first time that we've had an American guest on, given that we're sort of primarily a UK-based show mainly. So there's definitely a bit of a sort of crossing the ocean in terms of like what church culture looks like. But that was really cool, talking about worship and how that relates into comms. And then we also did a special crossover episode with the Church Office, and that's a very sort of UK church admin podcast. So that was brilliant that we did. We went on that, and Gavin came on ours.
Yeah, nice. And
think
certainly, you mentioned Joe from EA. I'm pretty sure, and I'm going to trip myself up here. We've had a few people from EA on the station recently. Andy B on our Get Your Home show does most of the interviews, so he had a kind of back to back a few different EA people. Nice. So doing some great stuff from there, and good to share things around, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a really good episode. That one, having sort of like real different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where Hannah got the title of her autobiography from as well.
Yeah, not my autobiography, just a mission book. So, right, you don't tell anyone.
Sorry, there's no one listening.
Everyone keep it to yourself. So it's really interesting. So Joe was talking about mission and just sort of Christianese and how we do a lot of stuff in church that is really weird and unnatural. It's an unnatural culture to a lot of people, especially as we go sort of further and further along and into a more secular society. And, you know, the just even between churches, you know, every church is different. But which she was sort of giving an example and said it would be really funny to take a load of vicars and put them in a betting shop and just to be like, how natural and comfortable you feel in here is how natural and comfortable a lot of people feel coming into church. And we were like, oh, that would be a really like funny documentary to do or something. And then I was like, oh, that'd be a really cool like mission book, like Vicars in a betting shop kind of thing. So yeah, that's I keep building a list of book titles and like no actual real concept of writing a book anytime soon. But yeah, so I just thought that was a really interesting way of viewing how I suppose it's how we communicate and how we engage with people, because the reality is so many people do not feel comfortable and do not understand what goes on in a church.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, I mean, some of that came out in some of the men's ministry stuff in that, you go into some churches and there's lots of lace tablecloths and
Mm.
the guy up the front, of course, is in a cassock, which some people, why is he wearing that dress? And then there's
Mm.
the various different, there's lots of flowers and it's not a really kind of masculine kind of thing. And there's not anything wrong with any of those elements
No,
in
it's not about
themselves,
sort of
but it's
wholesale changing them, is it? It's
not.
about having an awareness of them and
Yeah,
Mm.
saying, even if we just do the simplest service, there are going to be elements there which are completely alien to most people in society.
yeah.
Let's be aware of everything that we're doing that might be unnecessarily alien, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, we touched on this in some of the things we spoke about in the podcast recording. It's where my life is at. Is there's churches that will do certain things in certain ways, and then in the next breath say, but we don't have any younger people in, or we don't have the families, and
Mm.
like, well, look at what you've just described.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And try and make that connection. So that comes in sort of sharing that message and making that message visible. And I liked, well, I got it noted. It was on one of your things, Hannah, about being digital, using it as a tool for fellowship, sharing the gospel, and making disciples. So this is
I said that, so it makes me sound nice and
yeah.
aware.
Yeah, you wrote that somewhere, or AI did. I don't know. But yeah. No, but this is great. We have, and I think both of you have written things about post-COVID, and during COVID, lots of churches were kind of forced online and forced to do more digital. And I think the ones that are being more successful now, if success is the right word to use, are those who've still embraced what they learned from then and have still carried on with those church comms. Is that what you're finding through the support you're giving?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
so. Yeah.
I think it's difficult because both of us kind of offer something slightly different. So I think often we're the need or the desire for certain things are slightly different. So I think a lot of people acknowledge that a website is really important. It's something tangible. So there is a lot of value still ascribed to having a website. So people kind of go, oh, that's basic, we need that. Whereas engaging in digital, and that goes from just being active on social media to more live streaming to facilitating community online, that is a lot harder to get started and then maintain. So I think the desire has slightly gone down because suddenly we don't have the capacity. People who were really doing a lot of the Zoom Bible studies and stuff in the pandemic, they're going back to doing a on-site one, or they're actually just going back to the day-to-day job or something. Or it's a lot of people who were furloughed and they had the capacity to do it, and now they don't. Or it was experienced in the church that I was at, a lot of the stuff that was just generally looked after by people in the pandemic, they're tired now because they were retired people, and so now they're getting, and I love them all, but they're getting on and they're just tired because they've essentially done a hugely challenging job at a very stressful time for a lot of people. And so I think for me, I'm seeing a lot of a withdrawal of interest because for various different reasons. I'd agree with you that I think those that are succeeding at church, and I think it's a difficult one of how to what exactly is successful. It's different for everyone, and there's no shame in not being live streaming everything and being on every social media platform and creating lots of content if you're in the middle of rural Dartmoor and actually your audience is not that's okay. But I think that a lot of the churches that are growing and seeing outreach and seeing growth in terms of disciples and numbers is because they are understanding what means of communication people want, what are the cultural comforts of people, and how they can sort of engage with that through how they can engage their church through that to those people.
Yeah,
I think it's about listening and perspective, and we talk a lot about priority, but it's hard to set priorities if you don't have the right perspective. So if you feel like your church doesn't have anyone who's on social media, the chances are you're wrong. The chances are you do. But you need to be able to actually explore that enough and do a little bit of strategic thought to find out where they are and to find out what's working. And if people are coming in, and that might only be a small number of people, but where are they hearing about you? And those are the areas that you can then say, right, that might not be like a answer to every challenge that we have, but that's a good place to start. If we have a toddler group which is really working, then how do we sort of bring that along? And how do we promote that? And how do we use comms as part of that? We're not wholesale saying like, let's 10 times your comms budget.
Yeah.
The reality is that churches see it as less of a priority now than they did in COVID, because it kind of is less of a priority than it was in COVID. Like, it was the only thing that we could realistically spend money on at that time. But there are other priorities as well. If you've got a smashed window, then you need to repair that window. There's no two ways about that. And you'll probably pay 10 times as much for that as you would for a new website, but it needs to be done. Yeah. It's just about having that perspective, about sort of seeing what's working, thinking what is culture generally, but what is our community, and then how do we tap into that?
Yeah, wonderful. And I mean, you talk about effective communications, and that, and we see very much, don't we, that kind of, and in fact, you referred to it there, Hannah, as the church group, or those that are leading it, are all getting older, and primarily, and it's brought to me with a lot of the clients I work with, say, we're not getting any younger here, and it's those older style groups who are not necessarily, let's not generalize too much, but not necessarily so active in digital ways. So it's even encouraging those other ways of communications. And as much as we're talking here about digital stuff and websites and all that, it's that offline communication that can even come from, it's that dual approach that still very much is needed. This isn't a one size fits all. We need that dual approach, don't we?
Yeah. I think as well that when you talk about our title of the podcast, it's Gourds and Pomegranates, common sense for church communications. I feel often we kind of like that we don't say that. And I think that's the thing, is we're not saying everyone needs to do everything and be on everything. As Joe said, it's priorities, but it's common sense. If you have a small church and a small team, you do not need to have a 3-camera live stream and, an hour-long breakdown, post-service video thing going out on every channel, and it being that is not common sense. But if you have lots of young people, or you have someone who is interested or skilled in certain areas that could fall under communications, photographer or interested in video, or just you have a kind of large younger congregation, or there's a group of young people, common sense, engage them in doing something with it. It's about doing what is right, and again, priorities, but actually of going, well, how does that fit in with us? If we've got the people who can do that, how can we engage them? Because actually for them, it might be a blessing to be engaged and serve in some way. It could be a really fun thing for younger people, 5 kids doing A levels or something. And you just go, hey, do you want to just see if we can make something for Instagram or something, make some little videos that talk about what church is like here. And they don't have to be super slick, but actually suddenly they're going, oh, this is really cool. We've given this responsibility. We are seen as someone who can contribute to church, where it's not just welcome, worship, or coffee. Welcome, worship and water. As in sort of like, that's the typical things of where the people can only serve, but actually how can we sort of see the gifts, and how can that be in service?
Yeah, seeing every part, and I know sometimes this is used as a cop out from leadership to say, everything you can do, it's all part of your service, and it is absolutely. And certainly in the Vineyard, which is the church movement I'm part of at the moment, they have the saying, everyone gets to play, and that doesn't just mean on the kids team or in the worship group. It's some of those behind the scene things. But if
if you apply that to the worship group, everyone gets to play. Not everyone is good enough to play, and I say that respectfully. If you can't play an instrument, you shouldn't be in the worship group. But it's about finding people's giftings. But you know as well as I do, that doesn't happen by accident. Like, it needs some strategic thought and some planning into doing that.
Yeah, and that's where you guys come in, isn't it? To help to make things.
Well, hopefully,
yeah.
I mean, the common sense thing, that's how I got into church comms. Really, is because I was spending time online on social media. I knew a little bit of web design at that stage. As I alluded to, my background was in video, so that was the thing that I had sort of formal training in. But I'm going, there are churches that could be doing better than this, and it's not something which requires them to go and do a 3-year degree in. Like a lot of this stuff is common sense, and that's not to take away from any specialism in any area of comms. But a lot of it to get started is common sense. The most effective thing you can do if you want to get people to an event, in my experience, is personal inviting.
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't happen by accident. It's helpful to have a list of the people who maybe have been along to your previous events and split that out into who is responsible for inviting who. But that is the way that you will get the biggest turnout at the event. And it's a really simple thing. And even if they say no, what you've done there is continue to build that bridge and continue to have that discussion with that person. And even if they can't come to this one, they might come to the next.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, isn't it? It's about building those relationships. And it's not the only way, but it's a really effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always about even doing the event yourself. It might be jumping on someone else's event and joining in, offering that time to support. And then actually you can do that. I think we talked about this as well. I talk about it a lot. Do that radical thing of going to where the people are.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll ever catch on. It seems quite biblical. But going to where the people are, but then having those tools maybe within for communicating with people at that other event when it's more neutral ground, it's safer ground to do that. Yeah.
We have almost like an exclusive thing as churches where even if we do everything perfectly and loads of people get saved and God saves loads of people and all of that, it's still his work, not ours. So what's the point in getting precious about it at any point? If people are doing things well, then let's join with them, let's support them, and ultimately it's for the kingdom.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah. So so what kind of things are people coming to you with at the moment? What sort of projects are you working on, Hannah? What's on the agenda other than the thing we're not talking about?
That's all I'm thinking about at the minute. And the thing we're talking about is I'm doing an MA in digital theology, and I am 2 weeks away from finishing my dissertation that is grossly still very underwhelming at the minute. So please pray for that. Yes. So work that I'm doing. So I've just finished up a project with Somerset Chamber Choir. So they had me in last year. They're having their 40th anniversary, and they wanted a film to commemorate that. So I went along for a couple of their. So they have intensive kind of rehearsals and then a concert thing. So I went to sort of a couple of these weekend rehearsals, and then went to Wells Cathedral and filmed there for their concert. That was very, very posh. Thought I was very special. No, turns out you are more than allowed to take content within cathedrals. So I didn't feel as special, but got some nice footage. I've made a film for them. And then from that as well, they wanted some training. So that was sort of this latter part that we did earlier in the year of doing social media and content training. So that was more just sort of talking with them about what platforms they want to be on and sort of the types of things that they could create and how to navigate various platforms and things. So that was really nice. And that is a charity, and it's not church, even though a lot of them, and I met them through church contacts. Actually, it's very similar stuff of like how you think about the types of thing you want to be sharing, and also again the workload of going, this is not a full-time job for anyone, they're all sort of volunteers and it's sort of a voluntary role of anyone managing it. So it's very similar. I do I have a couple of clients that I do ongoing social media management for. So one in particular that I've really do really enjoy working with is African Pastors Fellowship. So they are a English charity that work in Africa, doing helping communities and predominantly pastors. And one thing in particular that they're very passionate about is they've made an app called Eva Tabu. It is effectively kind of YouVersion, but better in the sense that for African communities, it's in lots of different languages. And also then there are, in the same way, there are study guides to go along it, but also they've managed to work with other partners to offer resources on other things like agriculture. Brilliant. And stuff that are really like, I don't need that in YouVersion because my garden is a hobby, but for a lot of the communities in Africa, actually, it is the way that they eat. It is their livelihood. It is such a significant part of their communities. And then they do a lot of outreach and training as well for communities. And I was privileged enough to go to Uganda with them last September, and went out for 2 weeks and doing content. So meeting a lot of the partners. And so, we talk about being super, well, we don't talk about it actually. I am now aware of being super privileged in the UK. So we did a training day in one church, and I walked in and I was like, I think I've seen better sheds than this church. And like, a family friend used to be a farmer, and I'm pretty sure he has a fancier shed than, his cow shed was fancier than this church. It was like breeze blocks and a tin roof, and like plastic garden chairs, but they were so on fire for doing mission, for the, there was just wonderful fellowship, and just their worship was so beautiful. And I was like, gosh, and I'm not going to say how I normally say it. We are stressing about the colour of chairs in the UK, and like, oh, the heatings, it's not hot enough. And we were sweating in there because it was a tin roof in the middle of Uganda kind of thing. And it was such an eye-opening experience. And it was incredible. And then I went and did interviews with various ministers that they're partners with, and it was sort of people who are refugees from Rwanda, people from Malawi, and in Uganda, who, you're hearing the real life stories of people struggling, but their faith doesn't dwindle. And it was so inspiring. So then from that, I've made I captured loads of photos, and then I've done like a number of videos and like short films to kind of to share about those stories of the people I met. So so it's a real sort of diverse range of stuff that I get to do, but it's always quite exciting.
Sounds amazing. There's probably a whole other discussion about comfort in church and worship, and again, that will come into what kind of messages that we put out as well, and what message are we sending to the community. And I'm working with lots of churches that still have pews within them, and pews are lovely and they have their place, absolutely. But then you look at never mind.
Can I just say probably the places on the bonfire?
No, I want a pew.
Keep one at the back for posterity.
I want a pew as like a entrance thing. To like put shoes on, like in my house, but I don't. I think.
Well, there is a lovely project in Edinburgh that was a sister project to one I used to work with, that's has a workshop that is the volunteers are people moving on from homelessness or other social welfare issues. They're all supported through the project, and they specialise in using old church furniture and making. In fact, it's a great business model because they get given the old church furniture, make new stuff, and sell it back to the church. So it's a great model. But
it's expensive to get rid of pews.
It is, and they have lots of pews all lined up, and it's beautiful wood, a lot of it. And some of them are cheaper, and that's the only time I would side with Joe there and put them there. But there is some beautiful wood within, and the project I was at, the reception desk is made out of the pews that were in that place.
Oh, cool.
So you kind of people have sat on those pews for years, and there's some sensitivities around it. But now if you bring in a pushchair or a wheelchair, there's actually no spaces to put them, or you just block the aisle. And so we get so hung up on, we have to have these pews, and like, no, you don't. But it's a communication thing, isn't it? We still get hung up on, as you said, which color this or which crockery are we allowed to use today? And if someone comes in new, this communication, that's even the offline stuff. This is how we're communicating our message to people.
We take quite a broad definition of communication for the podcast. We had an episode a while back called "Through the Eyes of a Newcomer." It's saying right from when they arrive on your property in the car park, think about that journey. Go out now into your car park if you have one, and walk through that journey that someone takes, and notice the things that matter to them, that you walk past every week because you're there every week and you know it inside out.
No, that's really good. And it's how we even try and do things just differently here at Pure, in that we're not playing 100% Christian music. We're playing stuff that is pure. So, as we've said, it's all 3-point pure. There's no swearing, there's nothing immoral, nothing illegal. And that goes through all the music, all the lyrics are extra checked. And it's because actually we can do things differently. And it's just giving that different message across of how to communicate, is that actually we're not just singing hymns all the time. And
hold fast to what is good, and God puts a lot of good things in the world which aren't necessarily church things.
Absolutely. So Hannah's talked about some of her projects. What kind of things are you dealing with at the minute, Joe?
All sorts. So with my church hat on, so it's only relatively recently that I've started a part-time role at our church, which is in a really nice way dealing with the challenge of growth. Now it is a challenge, but what a challenge to have. So there's lots of parts of that, of how we're going to meet and that sort of thing. But as we record tomorrow, we've got an away day for our team leads, and we're moving over to more of a team system than what is essentially pretty much a rota system at the moment, and thinking about what that means to be a part of a team, that even when you're not actively serving on that week, what does that mean? And building that team dynamic of looking out for each other, caring for each other, having a vision for the ministry, rather than just kind of turning up and doing your bit. So that's taken up a lot of my brain space at the moment. In terms of my sort of main role of running Gallant, most of my stuff at the moment is web rather than brand. So I'm currently working with a pest control company, which is, great fun trying to find stock photography of pest control, and the amusing aspect of trying to use AI to get some of that, and having like ants that are the size of plates and like massive piles of sugar. I'm working with a lawyer who happens to be a Christian that I met through our Christian business group. I'm working with a couple of charities, and then I've got things booked up. So I'm going to be working with City Mission, which is the combination, sort of the umbrella of all of the different missions across the cities across the UK, and then obviously some churches as well.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, we're recording this in March, and it still feels like the beginning of the year to me. And I always have in my mind, January's the quiet time. That's when I can sort of reflect on the business, do a bit of planning. That hasn't been the case for like the last 3 years. January is always crazy busy, and I think it's because, especially with churches, they sort of take a deep breath after Christmas, go, right, now we actually do need to get our website sorted. We've been thinking about it for years, but Christmas is out of the way. And so they come and talk to me, which is great. And also means if they don't have a set timeline that they need to have it live by this exact date, then I can be really flexible. And I mean, I do huge discounts for churches anyway, so that helps when I can be flexible on timing. It means I can be even more flexible on price as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, as we said, it's what it comes down to, sadly. And the comms budget is often the one that gets pushed to one side. But
we don't see these things as investments, do we?
No.
Like, as a church, we just, that's another cost. It's another cost. And it's like, well, yeah, but sometimes, especially when churches sometimes are sitting on quite large amounts of money in the bank account, that's not always the case. But sometimes we're so scared of having to protect that amount there that we don't invest it.
Yeah.
We are given money by the congregation, not just to pay the pastor's salary, but to do kingdom work. Like, let's spend that money and let's actually go and do kingdom work.
Yeah, sharing the gospel, as we talked about earlier on. And I suppose if we tie that with the age profile of a lot of churches who are saying, we don't have the younger people, and then you look and you see, well, they're not actually involved in any online communications, which is where the majority of younger people will be. So, if you're wondering why you're not attracting them.
All the research says that like Gen Z and beyond are calling out for faith.
Yeah.
They are desperate for it. Yeah. Now, they're not necessarily, probably not looking for a really formal traditional church service, but they are there waiting to be reached, however we go about that.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm sneaking south of the border in a couple of months' time and working with a Church of England parish, and we're doing a family service in the village school on the Sunday afternoon. And as part of that family service, there's a whole growing theme through the whole weekend. And on the Sunday afternoon, we're going to make a wormery together in worship. Cool. So it's something different. We might sing some silly songs as well, but we're going to make a wormery, because apparently that's something that there's some people that are skilled in doing that. Now, who would have thought, if you went to church and we talked about, using your skills, that someone who knows about making a wormery could use that in worship? Well, we're going to do it. And it's a way that families can come together.
It's that sort of creative thing. And it's just something different that, yes, we have a carol service. And yes, it's probably our most well-attended event of the year, because people were more likely to come to a carol service than anything else. But like churches that do craft evenings or wreath making in the run-up to Christmas, that's really great, because it's something different that people come to. It's something fun. It's something low pressured. Whether it's purely you're just making wreaths and that's it, you're building those relationships, or whether there's a gospel part of it as well, like some teaching or something. But it's also really strategic, because then you are on their radar. You have their contact details, permission to send to them 2 weeks before your carol service as well, so you can invite people back in and they're more likely to come.
Yeah, it's those simple things, as you say. It's all coming down to common sense, which I think for a while we thought we needed to go on a course for to learn common sense, but it is within us all. So there's lots that you guys can help with people. So here's your 30-second plug for each of you. Where can we find? So Hannah, you go first. Where can we find FH Digital? Give us the gen.
So you can find me. My website is fhdigital.co.uk. I am not as active as I should be from my work accounts on social media.
Guilty as charged as well.
Yeah, FH Digital UK, and that has all of my. Actually, if you just go on my website, that links you to everything. That's got past training sessions that I've done, loads of resources and things. But that's the best way. But FH Digital UK.uk. No, fhdigital.co.uk. But just Google that and it should come up. But that's where you can find me.
Brilliant, seamless. That's great. Joe, where can we find you?
Yes, if you want to find the podcast, that's gppodcast.uk, and that's got links to all the different platforms. We put it out on Spotify, YouTube, whatever. But on those first two that I mentioned, you can watch it as well as listen to it. And then for web and branding stuff, begallant.uk, that aim to be gallant by name and by nature. So BEGALLANT.uk. And that will have my links on there. The platform I'm probably most active on social-wise is LinkedIn, so you can find me there as well.
Great. And it's probably your website that confused Hannah, because you're just a .uk, but Hannah's got the .co.uk.
Well, and I'm so used to other clients, and there was one the other day where I was like, oh, they're .org, and so I'm so like that there's lots of different ones, and then I always forget what's mine because normally I'm emailing it to people, so it's easy enough to do.
I mean, if that's the one question that every church asks me, oh, what type of domain? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We want a .com. Okay.
Yeah.
We want a .org. Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
No, absolutely. And there's a lot of them up my way that are .scot.
Oh, that's cool.
Claiming their nationality.
Great .scot.
Yeah, which is great. And of course here at Pure, we're .org. So we keep it simple with the .org. And as you said, the podcast there, Gourds and Pomegranates, gppodcast.uk is where you can find everything, and look for GP Podcast and pretty much every platform really, isn't it?
Yeah. Just be careful what you're looking for, because GP Podcast is a podcast about GPs and stuff, as someone did think when I said, GP Podcast, and they were like, you're talking about medical stuff. So it's orange and says church comms on it. Yeah,
it's very bright. You can't miss it.
And if you're feeling really brave, we've done it once in the past, but we'd love to do it again and have a case study. So if you want basically a free comms audit that is a little bit in public, but it's not like we're airing your dirty laundry. We're nice about it, but we'll go through what you're doing and areas that we might suggest for improvements, and we'll praise the things that you're doing well as well. So feel free to get in touch if you fancy that.
Wonderful. Sounds amazing. Hannah, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on Pure Brunch today. And we look forward to seeing all the things that are going to be coming out, and some amazing communications from churches around the UK. So thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.